while many who've been outraged at Trump's slurs against our armed forces feel the visit should be cancelled, I mean, King Charles is head of our armed forces, isn't he? Is there an argument for pushing ahead with it in the vague hope that having our non-political senior royals, Charles is extremely experienced, waving and smiling, maybe they can help rebuild some bridges with us in the United States? Now then, let's talk about Trump and Starmer for a moment. I noted last week how the mouse had finally roared after Starmer finally plucked up the courage to tell Donald Trump that seizing Greenland really wasn't on. This week, our Prime Minister struggled to find any words at all after Donald Trump besmirched the good name, the freaking world-class good name of our armed forces. And nearly 24 hours it took Starmer to demand an apology, albeit an apology that will never come. And within that 24-hour period, I've had friends and strangers. The most recent was a black cab driver who picked me up from Waterloo yesterday. And all of them said what a monster Trump has revealed himself to be. How in many cases, and my taxi driver was one of them, how in many cases, any good these people had seen in Trump, I know, challenging, but how whatever good they saw in Trump had vaporised quicker than you can say nuke Greenland after Trump doubled down on that earlier slur against NATO forces in Afghanistan, first of all in Davos and then later on a right-wing news station. And yet it took our far from beloved leader, as I said, nearly 24 to articulate our feelings on our behalf. And I would say that Starmer's dithering reeks of fear and doubt, weaknesses that Trump can sense a mile off. What if Starmer had immediately censured the tyrant for trashing our role in that joint military operation that lasted, lest we forget, 19 bloody years, an operation ultimately undermined, many would say, by Donald Trump, who during his first term of chaos greenlit the release of 5,000 hardened Taliban fighters held as prisoners of war in exchange for 1,000 Afghan soldiers, 1 for 5. What a great deal that was, Donald Trump, for the Taliban. Strikes me with each passing week we see a little more of the real Donald Trump, the flaws his most vocal critics and political opponents have been flagging up for years, flaws that even former allies say the world should be wary of. And yet, is anyone in Downing Street paying attention? One man who's not been afraid to stick his head above the parapet is the California governor, Gavin Newsom. Here he is speaking at Davos this week.
Popular sovereignty being challenged every single day by voter suppression, trying to rig elections. I mean, heck, Donald Trump tried to steal the election, the last election, tried to light democracy on fire, and then pardoned everyone that participated in that.
Newsom went further. Can I just say it on the record? Man, that guy, I mean, I'd vote for him. He accused European leaders of being played for fools by Trump. He urged them to abandon what he described as, and these words are important, performative diplomacy in the face of coercion.
I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic. Nobel Prizes that are being given away. I mean, it's just pathetic. And I hope people understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. I mean, at least from an American perspective, it's embarrassing.
Can you imagine Keir Starmer coming out with anything like that? Me neither. Could you imagine Tony Blair doing it? I can, actually. I can. Zelensky, he was just as unequivocal, the Ukrainian president taking aim at NATO's European allies, criticising them for not doing enough to protect themselves against the threat posed by Russia. He accused Europe of being in Greenland mode as Trump's mission to seize the world's largest island continues to dominate global discussions, distracting, Zelensky said, Europe for Russia's growing influence in Belarus. He said no one helped their people in 2020, and now Russian Oreshnik missiles are deployed in Belarus within range of most European capitals. That would not have happened if the Belarusian people had won in 2020. Now, to be fair, Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Mark Carney, they all had a pop or two at Trump, while few European leaders bothered to turn up at the launch of Trump's bizarre plan to turn Gaza into some kind of holiday resort. But I come back to those words, performative diplomacy in the face of coercion, the words of Gavin Newsom, which I think kind of describes Starmer's demand for an apology last night. Not the kind of visceral, like-for-like verbal punches that Gavin Newsom and Zelensky are seeking from our European leaders.
And so I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured, and in fact, across the country.
Now, I've never seen the film Love Actually. I know what it's about, but producer Elliot was telling me that this could have been Starmer's Hugh Grant moment, a chance for our not very beloved leader to step out of the grey, dull and inoffensive shadows and really lay one on Trump. Listen, mate, I've had it up to the back teeth with your warmongering twaddle. Peace in Ukraine on day one, you promised. No new wars, you promised. Where the hell are those promises now? We gave you a really bloody nice state visit, and this is the thanks we get. Not on my watch, you great orange buffoon. I suppose we can dream, that one day we might have a leader with the cojones, the chestnuts to come out with a speech like that. But until then, it's Keir Starmer. 0345 6060 973. I'm interested in your feelings, the feelings that Keir Starmer's eventual demand for an apology generated. I want to know about the feelings you had in those long hours while we waited for him to say something to contradict Trump's false assertion that British soldiers were nowhere near the front line in Afghanistan, when more than 450 were killed and more than 2,000 seriously injured. While you're dialing, I'm joined by Robert Clark, fellow at Yorktown Institute, Telegraph columnist, not a communist, heaven forbid, and a former soldier who was deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan as well. Good morning to you, Robert. Nice to see you.
Morning, Matthew. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your work in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think that needs to be said right at the off, as we have the leader of the free world denigrating the role of UK soldiers like yourself in those conflicts.
Well, not at all. That's very kind. I think, look, if you speak to most veterans over the last 24 hours, as I have, and I'm sure you and your other producers have as well, that there is a shared collective sense of outrage, moral outrage, and moral indignation at President Trump's comments and remarks. It is hard not to take those personally. Somebody who spent his 20s fighting in the Middle East and Afghanistan, hand in glove with American forces. I spent a period of my military career attached to Americans in America as well, integrated into their military apparatus. So I thought, I saw firsthand and fought firsthand alongside them. But look, there is slightly more going on here. We can have several things that are true at once, right? We can have an American president who does say the most unpredictable, offhand, and deeply offensive remarks sometimes. But then we also have the reality that, look, this is the most important bilateral relationship Great Britain has. There is no greater long-term security and economic ally than the United States. And I think we have to remember the context of that when we speak about how robustly we should push back against the current serving American president. Keir Starmer has condemned it, as have all political leaders, quite rightly. And then we argue, or we discuss the degree to which they should have pushed back. I think Keir Starmer, and I'm no fan of the Prime Minister, but I think he struck the right balance, the right tone. And I think, if I may, just going to your earlier remarks in terms of, look, should this come into the state visit by the King and the Queen later this year for the commemorations of the American independence? I think, look, the King has, and the royal family in general, have a huge what we call soft power pull in America, especially with this president. And I think it would be deeply foolish and quite, almost cutting our nose to spite our face to even consider relinquishing, that visit.
It's really interesting, because I've been on a little journey with that story, and I have come round to I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I've come round to your way of thinking with regards to the state visit. If I may bring it back to Starmer's response, the first thing that needled me was the long delay. So during the course of yesterday, I lost count of the number of conversations I had with people, all expressing outrage about Donald Trump. My taxi driver was brilliant because he said, I quite like Donald Trump at the beginning, and he said a lot of my mates did, but he said he's crossed the line. It's gone too far. We've got Gavin Newsom speaking about performative diplomacy and in very, very strong terms saying that Europe needs to sort of snap itself out of this sort of traditional way of doing international diplomacy. And I got the feeling that Newsom was arguing for a much more aggressive language from European leaders, including Keir Starmer. Yesterday in Starmer's speech, when it eventually arrived, he was clearly very, very angry. I can't doubt his sincerity. But it took a long time to get there. And if I was to use Gavin Newsom's words, it still had the air of performative diplomacy about it. I'm going to ask for an apology. I don't expect to get one, but it didn't show anger and it didn't show passion to me.
No, I think you raise a really good point, and you've almost hit the nail on the head in terms of, look, this is a wider issue than, Keir Starmer's condemnation of the president's remarks. Number 10, this current government are notoriously slow, notoriously, inertia to making, communication and trying to shape the narrative. They're all too often shaped by the narrative. The communications team inside Downing Street are, like I say, very, very slow to react. I think to his credit, we could see that in a positive way earlier this week regarding Greenland. Yes. And the American president's desire to potentially take it by force. And then we saw obviously the tariffs being announced last weekend. And again, to his credit, we could see the Prime Minister cautiously hold off, making a knee-jerk emotive reaction like we did in Brussels, who instigated immediate retaliatory tariffs. And we could see how that played last year in Trump's so-called tariff wars with China and other countries that announced those tariffs on his so-called Independence Day. The UK held back, announcing reciprocal tariffs, and we were one of the first to get the lower amount, and then it was receded altogether. So we can see the benefit of that sort of calm pause. But again, to your point, in terms of something that's so visceral and so emotive to the British national psyche, which is the heroism of our armed forces over the last 20 years. I can absolutely see why there's been this quite intense public backlash, and quite rightly.
And something else I'm very, very interested to hear from you as an ex-serviceman is, it's a question I can't even believe I'm asking, but where are UK, US military, where's the military alliance going forward? Would we work together? Has a line now been crossed?
No, it's an excellent question. It goes back really to the idea of the royal family in a way, and that is the British-American relationship is so strong, and it transcends any particular bilateral relationship in the White House and Downing Street at any one time. This is, such a strong relationship that's built on many, many foundations. The military relationship is absolutely crucial. Thankfully, there are incredibly strong links between the British military and the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, which, like I say, transcend the political level of a particular leader who's going to be out in 3 or 4 years. That's one of the strengths of our relationship. It can stand or withstand the turbulences that we sometimes have in the transatlantic relationship between Washington and London. This is one of those times. The military relationship will continue to go from strength to strength. I have no doubt in it. I see this day to day. We still work hand in glove with the Americans across the globe, really, to the benefit of not just the British, but, the wider free world in general.